It's pretty incredible when you stop and think about the power of a single idea. I'm not just talking about something that inspires you, I mean an idea that can literally reshape the world. Well, today, we're going to dive into one of the biggest of all time.
So, yeah, how does an idea change the world? That's what this is all about. We're going to follow the story of this tiny religious group, starting out on the absolute edges of a massive empire, and see how it ended up right at the center of Western power. Okay, so let's set the scene. We're talking 2,000 years ago. The Roman Empire, they were it, the undisputed superpower. Their armies, their laws, their language, even their gods, they ran the whole show around the Mediterranean. It really seems like Rome would last forever, just totally unshakable.
But here's the thing. An idea born in this faraway, kind of forgotten province was about to prove stronger than every single one of Rome's legions. This wasn't a conquest with swords and shields. It was a conquest of hearts and minds.
And look, this did not happen overnight. Not even close. We're talking about a 1,000-year journey, a whole millennium, from a single preacher in Galilee to an emperor completely changing his beliefs, all the way to massive fights and splits within the faith itself. It is an absolutely epic story. So let's get into it.
All right, so where does it all start? Well, it begins with the message, and crucially, where and when that message first appeared. So picture the Roman province of Judea. There's this a feeling in the air, a real sense of anticipation. For hundreds of years, the Jewish people had been waiting for a Messiah, a prophesied hero. And living under the thumb of Roman rule, a lot of people were hoping for a warrior king, someone who would lead a rebellion and bring back their freedom. But the person who actually showed up, a Jewish preacher named Jesus, was talking about a totally different kind of revolution. It wasn't about fighting Rome. It was about changing yourself spiritually. And his core message, it was so simple, it was radical. Just love God, love your neighbor, and forgive people. And how he taught these big ideas was just as important as what he taught. He used these things called parables. Basically, they're just simple stories about everyday life, which meant that these really deep spiritual ideas were suddenly easy to understand for anybody, whether you were a farmer or a fisherman. Think about the famous one, the parable of the Good Samaritan. Jesus tells this story about a guy who gets beaten up, and the only person who stops to help him is someone from a rival, hated group. Then he just asks, so who is the real neighbor here? Boom. Just like that, the story completely flips the whole idea of what a neighbor is. It's not just the person next door, it's anyone who needs your help. Well, this message and the huge crowds he was starting to draw really started to freak out the Roman authorities. To them, any guy who could get that many people to follow him was a potential problem. They didn't see a spiritual leader, they saw a risk to their power. And that view led straight to his arrest and his execution by crucifixion for treason. And in the eyes of Rome, that should have been it. Story over. But then, his followers made this incredible, world-changing claim. They said he had risen from the dead. That single belief, the resurrection, that was the spark that lit the fire. It took this small, heartbroken group of followers and turned them into the founders of a whole new religion, Christianity. So you gotta wonder, right? How did this tiny group, following a leader who'd been executed in a backwater province, not only survive, but actually start to grow inside the most powerful empire on Earth?
Well, it came down to two things, people and infrastructure. You had key leaders, apostles they were called, like Peter, a fisherman, who went and set up a church right in the heart of the empire, in Rome. But then there was this guy named Paul. And Paul, he was a total game changer. He was a Roman citizen, so he could travel freely. And he used the incredible Roman road system and the common languages, Greek and Latin, to take this message to everyone, not just the Jewish community.
Now, this set up a massive conflict. From the Roman government's point of view, Christians were traitors. Why? Because they wouldn't worship the emperor as a god, and that was a huge no-no. So the state cracked down, leading to these brutal persecutions. But for regular people, especially the poor, the slaves, the forgotten folks, this new faith was a lifeline. It gave them hope. It told them they had dignity. And it created this amazing community where people actually took care of each other.
The government's response could be unbelievably cruel. And it created this new kind of hero, the martyr, someone who was willing to die for what they believed in. And here's the craziest part, the big paradox. The more the Romans persecuted them, the more the movement grew.
The martyrs' courage just inspired more people to join. It had the exact opposite effect of what Rome wanted. Okay, so this pattern, growing from the ground up while being attacked from the top down, went on for almost 300 years. And then something happened. One of the most shocking plot twists in all of human history.
The year is AD 312. The Roman emperor, a guy named Constantine, is about to fight a massive battle. And this isn't just any battle. This is for control of the entire empire. Everything is on the line. And the story goes that right before the fighting starts, he looks up into the sky and sees a vision, a flaming cross blazing in the sky.
And he hears a voice, or sees a message, that says, "In this sign you will conquer." He has his soldiers paint this Christian symbol on their shields. And what happens? He wins. And in that moment, everything changes.
The fallout from this was just huge and fast. The very next year, he issues the Edict of Milan, which makes Christianity legal. The persecutions after centuries are over. And then, get this, by 392, less than 80 years later, it's the official religion of the Roman Empire. The very faith that Rome had spent centuries trying to stamp out had just taken over.
So, okay, the religion goes from being illegal to being the official state religion. That's great, but it creates a brand new problem. How do you manage this sudden explosive growth? You need a system. You need a structure.
And where did they look for a model? Well, they looked at the most successful organization around, the Roman Empire itself. Seriously, they built a hierarchy that mirrored the empire's structure. You had the regular church members, the laity, then priests, then bishops. The bishops were in charge of areas called a diocese, which is the exact same word the Romans used for their administrative regions. It's fascinating.
But here's what happens when you get big and powerful. You get politics. And with politics, you get conflict. The success started to create new problems, but this time, the fractures were coming from the inside.
Over the next few hundred years, this big split started to form between the western part of the old empire, which spoke Latin, and the eastern part, which spoke Greek. And they disagreed on some really fundamental stuff. Like in the West, the leader in Rome, the Pope, said he was in charge of everybody. But in the East, their leaders, the patriarchs, said, "No way, you're just one of us." They even spoke different languages in church. And a huge one was about power. In the West, the Pope often had power over kings and emperors. In the East, the emperor was the one in charge of the church. So these arguments just bubbled under the surface for centuries, until finally, in 1054, they officially split. And that's how we got the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church.
And believe it or not, that split, which happened almost 1,000 years ago, still has a massive impact on politics and culture today, especially in Europe. It's just an amazing reminder that history isn't really in the past. Its echoes are all around us. Which kind of leaves you with one final thing to think about, right? What other ancient splits or old arguments are still quietly running the show in our modern world?